Welcome to She's Black,
where we keep it real, raw, and relentless
about all things Black women. Welcome to She's Black, where we keep it real, raw, and relentless about all things Black women. Y'all, today we're going to have a super exciting episode, and we are introducing another element of the She's Black show. And by looking at it, you can probably guess what I'm about to say, but we have a new part of the She's Black show, which is She's Black and He Is Too. So we talked about on episode five, I believe it was, where we talked about submission, sacrifice, and societal standards. That was the topic of episode 5. And in that conversation, we discussed the necessity for the male voice. So as we promised, we will deliver, and we will be having that discussion from the male's point of view. So for all you women tuning in, you know, we like to think that we know everything. This is a moment for us to learn and to consider and to find balance. So super excited about that. And as y'all know, I'm your host, Kibet. India is not with us today, and we know Tashi and Chazzy, they're going to be chiming in on the Deeper Dive Lives that you can catch next Wednesday. So watch this episode, make sure you understand what's going on, and be ready for Deeper Dive Lives next Wednesday on YouTube. Remember, if you are watching us on YouTube, the Deeper Dive Lives are going to be on Facebook. But if you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I mean, if you're tuning in right now, it's worth you just subscribing and making sure you don't miss an episode. So hit the notifications bell. Also, if you like this episode, which I'm 100% certain you will, make sure you like and make sure you share it. Tell your people about it. Hit the share button. It doesn't cost you anything to support us in that way, and we really appreciate it. For those of you who are catching us on other social media platforms, we are the She's Black Show on Facebook, the She's Black Show on Instagram, and then of course the YouTube channel, The She's Black Show. You can catch us at www.theshe'sblackshow.com. If you are just tuning in on audio, catch us on your favorite podcast station. That's like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, etc. There's quite a few to name. I won't name them all, but you know where you can hear us, where you can catch us, okay? All right, thank y'all again for tuning in. I'm super excited to get this episode started, and we cannot do this without our sponsors. So our sponsor for today is going to be Linked with Love, and that's L-Y-N-K, traditional spelling of linked, and L-O-V-E, love. So I thought it was a great sponsor because our last episode focused on a woman's point of view about a subject matter, and we're going to link that with the male's point of view today, and hopefully we find balance and love in it all. With that being said, Link with Love, what that company does is they promote and they create custom handmade jewelry using natural metals and crystals. So it's pretty awesome. I actually don't know if y'all can see it, but I am rocking some Link with Love today. This malachite bracelet wrapped in copper. So it's full of energy, full of love, and I'm super excited about it. And you can find Link with Love, again, that's L-Y-N-K with Love, on Instagram, and www.linkedwithlove.com. Again, that is L-Y-N-K. Make sure you go show some love and some support. And if you can't get anything right now, at least inquire and share and support the jewelry artist. This is pretty awesome jewelry, so make sure you check it out. All right, so y'all, again, our topic for today is going to be the same topic that we had before, but from a male point of view. So submission, sacrifice, and societal standards. This is an exploration of gender roles, and we're going to be sharing some of the same questions, some of the same things that we talked about, and then getting their opinions on statements we may have said or things that we discussed in the episode, so that we can round this out and make sure we always focus on staying balanced, because we cannot exist without each other. All right, so on today's show, I need to introduce you to these wonderful, handsome men that are sitting before me, and I'm super excited to have them. They are crazy intellectual, they have wonderful energy, and just beautiful people overall. So to my right, which is probably your left, but to my right, I have Philip Davis, and we'll let him say a little bit about himself in a moment. To my left, I have Orion. For those of you who don't know, this is usually the man behind the camera, also the man that is my husband that probably learns a little bit too much about me on this podcast. But we're excited to get started. So Philip, take a moment and tell them a little bit about yourself.
I'm just happy to be here. First of all, thank you for having me. My name is Philip Davis. I'm actually the brother of Orion, and certainly my sister-in-law. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. 48 years old, to give a little bit of perspective. Born and raised here in Southwest Georgia. So I'm just excited to be here. Got me a little out of my comfort zone. Have not had much experience actually talking in front of a camera. So this is a new experience for me. Always loved chopping it up and talking amongst the kitchen table and various circles, but to be at this very public forum is new. So so I'm excited. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
Oh, well, I'm Orion. I am, like I said, again, Philip's brother, and this is my wife, my lovely wife, Kibet. I share the same sentiment as Philip, that this is kind of new territory. I'm used to someone being behind the camera. I know as an artist, I'm in front of the camera doing music and things of that nature, but to be able to come together and talk on these subjects, I'm so thankful that you created this platform, so that we can have discussions like this, and open up the door to deeper dives and things of that nature. So I'm just happy to be here, ready to talk.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get in, y'all. So the first thing that we talked about, me and India, in this conversation was like, one, what are gender roles to us? And do we really believe in them? Meaning, do we believe that they're applicable, that they make sense, that there's a necessity for gender roles? So, we talked a little bit about what that meant for us. She gave some examples of things like if you hear a bump in the middle of the night, then it's the masculine role to go get it, or maybe taking out the trash. I kind of made it more broad in the sense of protection and nurturing, protecting and providing being how I saw the masculine role, and then nurturing and teaching and all those things how I saw the feminine role. And then there's of course those little things that kind of go into pocket underneath those roles. So I want to know from you all how you define gender roles. Like when you think of a gender role, what is that to you? So we'll let you go first, and then we'll let you follow up if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Gender roles. Now this is unique because to be honest, I am a male, and when I have learned about gender roles or heard about gender roles, it's like, okay, these are things that men are supposed to do, and then the woman is supposed to do this. I've questioned both sides coming up in my life. I'm like, okay, why? Is there chauvinism involved? Like it could be male chauvinism that's saying, hey, why is it that the male just supposed to have this? It was seen as like a dominance in so many things, and the woman is just to be behold to the woman, to the male. I would see that as far as gender roles are concerned, and so my thoughts may be a little different than some men, but as far as gender, I look at now. Let me say this. I do feel that there are some things that a woman can do differently and more and be more efficient at than a male. Like say the nurturing. I've heard that women have more taste buds than a man. So when you're talking about food preparation and things of that nature, being able to, when they say put love in the food, not saying that no man can't put love in food, but it's just that process from birth, her being the first teacher, and her, and I've always honored those things, and so it's unique to me. Like I said, I still find myself questioning the separation between roles, and like, okay, if we're partners, and of course, born separate, quote unquote, genders, but if we come together and we're partners, then we figure out what we can do, and how we can help each other with it. That's, I'm sure I'm going to learn more as we're discussing, but that's my thoughts about gender roles.
All right, so it sounds like you don't really have a I guess, defined boundary for roles particular to a gender. You just respect the fact that there's some things that one gender versus another may be more efficient or more may be able to do a little bit better, or maybe more equipped to do, potentially.
And then, like say, I mentioned female, but I said, like, for example, genetically, they say men have tougher skin.
Mm-hmm.
So if I utilize that and if I have a larger muscle structure, or testosterone, and being able, and I use that to protect my family, I think that's a natural thing to do. It's a lot of it is social construct to me. Gender roles, and like I said, we've discussed, a lot of it is socially constructed of how a family is supposed to be and what's supposed to happen, who's supposed to do what. It's great for me.
Understand. Okay. So how do you if you define gender roles at all, how do you see that, and with how you see it, do you believe in it? Does it make sense? Does it?
Well, I think that you may say, or use the word instinctive. What comes instinctively in our decisions and how we place ourselves. But I agree with you in the fact that it is a construct coming from where. Now, of course, as we have evolved over time as a civilization, we have studied things and looked at the data at what makes sense for that particular time, that particular era. And then we begin to write those things in doctrine, if you will. Of course, that's way later. So now it gets to the point where you don't really think about it to a degree. If you use the word family, well, what is my family? 60 years ago, 100 years ago, you use the term family as the nuclear makeup, the man, the wife, and the children in this family, and then what happens or what do you put in place to make that family work. And so, of course, living in America or living in Europe or living in a Western society, as I heard the term come up in the last episode, who were the founders of that society and what book were they using in order to use as a guideline as to how they're going to run their families. So a topic came up about I remember, was it Chazzy that brought? No, it wasn't Chazzy that brought up how she referred to the Bible, or there was reference to Scripture, whether or not reference to Scripture as to how that makeup is. Okay. Paul, I do believe, so it is studied that when he was writing to the church of Ephesus, I believe it was Ephesians 5 and 22, when it started talking about submit yourselves to one another. Then it goes on to say, wives, submit yourselves unto your husband as wives, as Christ is to the church. It also talks about that again in 1 Peter chapter 3, again on that submission. And so it kind of brings clarity if you're going to use that teaching from those forefathers into this country, and has it shape, or using the word shape, this society as how it goes. Those civic organizations coming together and saying that we are going to adopt this practice or adopt this ideology as to how we run our families. So if you hear it, or even if you're asleep in church, you're still, or wherever you are, you're still going to hear it subliminally. You're going to hear it when there may be a disagreement amongst your parents, to say, okay, either she reaffirms in an argument, says, no, you're the head, so you need to fix this, or I'm the head, so you need to fall in line, or whatever the case is. You hear it, and so that becomes a part of that social makeup.
Okay.
So, but here now today, over the last 40 and 50 years, you begin to see those ideals deconstruct. Well, there was war, and then women had to take on more roles to work the factories and so on and so forth, and take on and do those manly jobs. And then when the husband comes back home from the war, she has a kind of a different ideology of provision and who provides and whatnot.
Household runs.
Yeah, how the household runs. It changes, because you can try to go back to doctrine, but once you've issued the practice, then it shows that, okay, here's the doctrine, but I see how in the time of war or in the time of need, you disregarded the doctrine as to how we're going to run things. And so now I don't necessarily hold that ideology in high regard like I used to. So you see this deconstruction period of that social makeup. And so when we can go further, I want to pause to allow a comment.
Well, one, I wanted to say that, first off, thank you for answering that question, because I myself, I think India brought up that in the Bible it spoke about wives submitting to their husbands. And I honestly, I have a smart aleck way of saying things, and I don't always mean it. No. But I literally said in there, if anyone can give me where that's at, I would appreciate it, because I honestly didn't know.
Right.
And so you just said that. So we might go back and highlight that, and maybe put that verse up where it comes, because it's good to kind of know where the information is at. So thank you for sharing that, first of all. And I do think that perspective, because, obviously most of us here, all of us here, were not living in that time frame where women were coming out of the home and having to work, as you said, because the men were away at war. We just are the results of those women. Exactly. And so for us as women, me and India, who had the conversation, we are the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of those women. So the ideologies that were once adopted by our great-great-grandmothers have kind of faded away, and we've adopted new ones in this new world that we live in. And so it's not as familiar with us to reference those times before. And so understanding how we got to where we are, we just know where we are.
That's right.
And we speak on where we are. So understanding or being able to see that kind of unveil or that deconstruction spoken about gives a lot of reference and relevance to where we're at. So I definitely appreciate that. But feel free to continue.
Yeah, I think it's so when we get away from whatever this group of people, whether it's Americans or wherever you're coming from, begin to question and begin to call out, because and they're using the word submission. I mean, we have to submit to a lot of things. We submit to our bosses. We submit to our governments. We have to submit our money. We have to submit, taxes. There's always various levels of submission. However, we have to in this deconstruction period and this rebuilding, because at the end of the day, it's what, and when we're talking about gender roles and we're talking about relationships, what is being discussed at that time of courtship between the man and the woman, or the man or female and their partner? What is being discussed at that time of courtship when you say, you know, I want a relationship, and what that means? You know, some things should be easy to discuss, and some things have to be pried out of each other so that we can understand that this is my idea of what our relationship or family if you will, is going to be. There's books have yet to be written about how we move forward. There is data now that still has to be examined as to what are the pros and cons to this way of life or that way of life. You know what I'm saying? So it is a constant evolving thing. It's a constant thing that has to be that will be brought at the kitchen table to discuss how are we going to make this thing work. Because we know, because I remember in episode 5 we talked about, okay, so sometimes the man is the amazing cook, and he loves to do it, and that's how he shows his love. And the female, she trades the stock market and makes oodles amounts of money, right? And so money is or isn't an issue, or she handles that part and she's meticulous and she runs that well. So it's evolving, and I think it'll just continue to be a discussion as to how we make this work. This deconstruction period has brought out some very vast ideas as what makes up a family.
Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and go into. You kind of got us into that space.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. We're gonna go into a little bit more about how those roles do or do not affect us. Okay. All right. So, you know, like I said, you kind of brought us right into this next question that I have that we talked about was, do we feel that in the ideology of how you all view gender roles, whether you view them or you view them from the lens of society, do you feel that both male and female gender equally benefit from the acceptance of gender roles, or is it one-sided? Is it balanced, or is it one-sided, meaning male or female, who gets the most benefit? So whoever wants to go first with that one, just dig in.
Well, I think you can use, and in most things that we discussed, you could use the word depends. It just depends. What do you want out of this relationship? And what is your idea of living comfortably, and then based on that, that's where you begin to kind of measure out, because you could be very simple in your walk in life, or you can be complex and have a lot of things going on, a lot of things that you want to do that you will need a special kind of support.
Right.
So if you have a female that says, no, I'll go to where I work part time, or I work a part time job here, or a full time job. I'll be home by 4. I'll get the kids, as long as the house is nice and clean, and I can spend time with my kids for the rest of the evening, waiting on you to get home. And we can take a vacation twice a year, and I can read my books. I'm fine.
Okay.
And if the husband says, yeah, if you could, all I want is to be able to hold down the fort and take my motorcycle to the mountains every other weekend, I'm good. Things, it doesn't have to be a complex conversation. It just depends. Like I said, so in that moment of courtship, where you decide, and when you come to terms to find out what you want out of life, that will determine it.
Okay.
I think also, in addition to that, I think it's whether either side benefits more or less is determined by how the society is ran itself. Like, what are the expectations in the society? Like the fact that if not just with surviving, but in order to thrive, in order to prosper, you know what I mean, and various things that supposed to, what does prosperity look like? What does moving forward as a family look like?
Right.
What does, is it the house, the picket fence, you know what I'm saying, a couple of vehicles, and to be able to go on vacation, and all of these things, if that's your ideal, and that's the accepted or majority accepted ideal, then it's like, okay, now look at what's expected to be successful just as an individual, male or female, and then look at what you got to do to apply it. Look at what you got to do to become that. And so now, if I'm building a family, I say, okay, well, I can get this high-paying job, or a job that does like this. So this job that pays this amount of money is predominantly set up for a male. You feel what I'm saying? And a male to make the most benefit from it, because now it's a thing where, and we know this not now, it's been that way, where women get paid less for doing the same jobs and things of that nature. Right. So it's rooted in the culture. It's rooted in the expectations of the society. And instead, because as I listen to what Philip was saying, as far as it depends, on what our expectations are as husband and wife or as a couple. But before that, in my opinion, I build certain expectations of what I need to do in this world because of what's already presented out there, of what the options are. Because in 100 years ago, a good job may be considered a totally different thing. Whatever a good, what do I need to do? I need to be in a farm. I need to know how to do, I need to know how to do certain things. And if we go look at various cultures and societies throughout the world, me being a good man, or what the man's responsibility is, could be totally different for me to gauge if is my role, does this benefit me more, does it benefit her more, things of that nature. Just with those external factors will tend to shape my view of what the role is before I even think about, oh man, this is better for me, or this is better for her. You know what I mean? Right. So yeah, that's a serious issue, because it's how we frame it in our minds. What that is. So I agree. It kind of depends, because certain situations you can say, well, that benefits the male more. Like, say for instance, like what was mentioned earlier about going to war, and then the women having to hold it down while we're fighting wars, and then we come back, and then a lot of the men expected the women to go back to doing what you were doing around the house, and then we'll launch out and do these things. To me, that if we're looking at gender roles in that regard, then that benefits the man. You know what I'm saying? That benefits, because that's saying that the woman needs to just be able to adjust. We can make whatever decisions we want. If we want to go and bomb this and do this, but we'll be back though. You hold my spot.
Right.
So that's unfair. That's correct, in my opinion. So that's benefiting the masculine. Now, the feminine, as far as a benefit,
I think as a feminine, there's definitely opportunities to benefit. Like, like I said, when I look back at the episode itself, I saw, for me personally, and I can own this right now, how submitting to a gender role for me was based on my personal convenience. Okay. I don't want to get up in the middle of the night to go check out a bump. So yes, there is definitely a gender role. But if you want me to submit to you, you gotta earn it. It's convenient for me. And so a lot of times as women, especially if we kind of all get on the same wavelength, like I forgot what the name of the film was. It's a crazy film. Maybe I shouldn't even mention it on here because your kids might try to watch it, so we're not gonna mention it. However, there is a film about a group of women, particularly black women, that band together and decided they were going to withhold certain things from the men in order to receive what they wanted or they felt they deserved as a whole, right? And it was like a movement. But whether we make that decision collectively, consciously, to band together, like right now is the state, when the feminist movement and all these things come, whether we consciously buy in or we are subliminally sucked in, we decide at the moment we feel it's convenient that we're not submitting to certain things. But at the same time, we're also holding men to submit to certain things. So that depends as well. But listening to you all, I feel like we had the same conversation from two totally different perspectives. Yours was very inside out, meaning we are in this inside of our space, and we're going to deal with the outward expectations based on what we on the inside decide, our personal relationship.
Right.
Yours was very outside in. We on the inside have already been influenced by what's on the outside, and we're just going to bring the outside to the inside before we have that conversation. Neither one is more right or wrong. If you ask me, they're both realities that you choose individually. Sometimes people may be out of line. I could be an outside in person and you're an inside out person, and we may struggle to find balance in those roles. But if we both have accepted, that we're going to use the societal influence on our decision making, then it makes it a little bit easier, because if we've also chosen the society that we exist in and we're comfortable in that society, then we tend to fall in line with what societal expectations or standards are. And so when we come to an agreement of how we're going to move, it's already by nature of what society has defined in order or aligned. If we decide that we are for each other and we're going to forget everything else that's going on out there, regardless of the society we're in, and we both fully agree to that, and we're both fully honestly being ourselves before we commit to each other, then that becomes an easier conversation too. I feel that this is a challenge. A lot of times there's an outside in person and an inside out person that comes together, or there are two inside people that come together, but they're not fully being truthful about what their personal expectations are. And so they're just kind of adapting as they go based on the feel goods. This person feels good to me and right now feels good. So yeah, I might not even like to cook, but I'm going to cook for him for, the first six months of our lives. And he's going to marry me and then find out his wife don't like to cook, whatever the case is, So if we're not being fully honest and fully introspective, honest with ourselves, about ourselves, and being willing to bring that person to the table and learn also about the other person, and hopefully they're doing the same thing, then that conversation becomes more difficult, but it doesn't have to be like what you said. So I completely get it. I think, in a case like potentially yours, if the society that you're in is not the society you would have picked, then it makes that conversation a bit more complex.
And I agree with that, everything you're saying. I think that even that outside in and inside out, if we make sure that we honor each one of those perspectives, because both of them, in my opinion, are equally necessary. Like you gotta, if we say, okay, you know what, you hear people say, man, that's my ride or die. You know what I'm saying? It's us against the world. You know what I'm saying? Me and you, it's us against the world. To me, that's that, okay, no matter what's going on out there, this is what we're going to do. And at the same time, it's necessary, in my thought, that we make sure I have to reevaluate and make sure that what I want to do, or that what we want to do, that it's not influenced. It doesn't work against me because I'm not, because I'm influenced by those outside forces. You feel what I'm saying? Like I gotta look at, as I get older, even right now, as I get older, how I thought about things when I was 20, even gender or as I was learning, like I said earlier, it's just I question things. The more I've learned, the more I've studied and whatnot, I start saying like, hey, okay, I recognize certain external influences that if someone wants to, if it's male dominant or male chauvinistic, and it fits, and it's been pushed and promulgated throughout the world. I see it, and I say, man, okay. So that's why a lot of people think like this, or that's why a lot of men are doing this right here. But I don't agree with that. So I got to make sure that, and that becomes a part of me to say, okay, this is how I'm gonna live. That's as far as if I'm defining myself as a man and what my responsibilities are on this planet as a male, then that's constantly being shaped for me. You know what I mean? I consider myself a lifelong learner.
Absolutely.
Always open.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so as I'm learning that, then when I come together with someone or with my wife, and then she we, like what you mentioned, you're thinking that you talk about the outside in, or if you're inside out person, and you start to, as you communicate, you learn those things about each other. I feel it's necessary. Like, even if we're both inside out people, at my age now and my experience now, I'm going to be the one, or I'm make sure, not to question whether you would do it or not, but I'm going to be the one that make sure I say, hey, I know that this is what we want to do. I know this is what we're going to do, but let's be aware of how things are affecting, or could affect us. Let's challenge ourselves also to question about the type of society we live in, and like you said, are we readily accepting, like something like, for me, as I get older, I want to be more global. I'm from Albany, Georgia. I've been blessed to have some experience with travel and things of that nature. But as I learn more about the society, I'm like, man, I'm not going to readily say that I'm just comfortable with how everything is done and how everything is promoted as far as what my roles are. And people be like, man, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you'll be fine. Just work hard. And there's certain things in this society that's been stacked against an African, what they call African American male. You know what I'm saying? That's right. That in certain places or in certain times in history or in our story that didn't exist. I was able to establish myself to know what it is to be, as a man, and what I'm able to do and how I'm able to move, and if I'm able to get land, if I'm able to build, even in recent times with Tulsa and other Rosewood and other places where we say, okay, you know what, this is what we do. We build, and and then my wife or my mate, this is what she does, and that family, because of what's going on in the society at that time. That's what's affected. But that's what I was thinking as you were talking about both of those outside and inside out. I think it's a balance. I think it's that both of those are equally necessary. You know what I mean? As equal as each other. It's just communicating in the relationship enough to figure that out, have those real conversations, and build that trust to where you can say, okay, this is. Now let's see where we are. We've accepted where we are right now. You know what I'm saying? This is where we're living. This is what we're investing our time in. Our children, in schools here and various things. So, let's figure out from there what we're going to do, and then whatever we agree to, that inside out part is we're going to stick to that. This is our plan.
Okay.
So that's.
So I think that segues us into another part. That we'll probably spend a couple minutes, maybe 4 minutes roughly each on it. Okay. And that is dealing with, when you're talking about the outside in perspective or the societal perspective, do we think, or believe, or whatever our experiences are, that societal expectations or standards are more Euro influenced or Afro centered, in their nature? And this is all, how you feel.
In my journey, I've heard elders mention that whoever wins the war writes the culture. Whoever wins the war, they establish the language, the ideology or the thought processes of, those who are in the environment, usually it's the predominant whatever religious system or or belief system that they had. They brought that forth as well, and it dominated. Like I said, the language, So for me, in my mind, in America, when you talk about anything, no, not anything, but most things, post-slavery would be European ideology. You can have civil rights to say, hey, well, we're here. Many have been enslaved or been subjected to whatever laws that you created, and it went from slavery, which you legalized, and then it went to later on. It was like, okay, well, sharecropping to Jim Crow. Right after that, to still make certain things that were inhumane and unfair to legalize, but legal in your system. And then so in all during those times, you have certain mindsets of acceptance and aspirations. Now your value system becomes, other than, because you don't, after hundreds of years of subjugation, your thoughts and your value systems that your people may have had prior to, you don't have that anymore. You're thinking like the person who subjugated you, or that you fell under subjugation to. And then so now, when we talk about roles, or we talking about how it's brought forth in America, a lot of that, in my opinion, is Eurocentric. As far as even if you don't go to slavery part and say just the establishing of America, from where, coming from Europe and saying, hey, well, we want to escape the king, and we want to have our own laws, and have ways that we do things, and have quote unquote freedoms to practice certain things and do certain things. And then people of color, even amongst that, even at that time, people of color weren't even considered. So myself, speaking as an African male, here in the West, the majority of what, in my opinion, the majority of what I'm taught in the school system, what my great ancestors were doing, that they were just to survive, that they were acting a particular way or had to live a particular way, and then that their children, who would be my great, whatever, they're watching them and seeing like, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what a man does. But their ideal of what a man does was not building what we were doing before. Before, their idea at that time was not trying to survive, or not get whipped, or not get, those things. So,
Okay.
That's, I think it's definitely Euro in my opinion.
Okay, so Philip?
Just a piggyback. You certainly hit all of the most of the history that we could follow in regards to that. It is a complex situation. It's a complex question, because we know that in any community, you will have certain leaks, cultural leaks, from one culture to the other, and they combine. It's kind of like New York. When you go to New York, you don't know, you have to get a feel of what is the culture of New York, because it's this melting pot of various cultures living on top of each other. Same way with the plantations. Yes, you had slaves coming into these plantations. In most of the time, you had slaves, and we know, and the history has shown us that the slaves outnumbered the so-called master, and so on and so forth. And so, if we've lost our languages, and we lost a lot of our folklore and our myths and things of that nature. But as children, but I think there has been a it's kind of like you go to Louisiana now in the bayou, and you have this gumbo of various foods, and you have and languages and dialects, because these cultures are colliding. And so when you pull your history book and talk about how many things that African Americans invented, right, that has been infused into this culture, and so some of the ideas come with that. So I think it's a little bit more complex. Yes, the subjugation was there. Yes, the languages was stolen, but even some of our queens having to breastfeed the so-called master's children, and so on and so forth, and the things that they taught those children in the kitchens and while they're cleaning the house. There was this constant infusion of both Euro and Afrocentric viewpoints. Can we separate it now and try to piece it together and see who brought what? It's another conversation, but I think it's more complex.
So, listening to both of you all, I 100% agree. I do think that from your perspective, or the perspective that you share about the amount of forced European influence on our culture, or how we adapted to a particular culture that was at the time, still unfortunately is, more convenient to European society or way of living. But listening, like when he was talking about Louisiana, it hit a spot for me, because Louisiana is such an influence of such a mixture of influence of culture. There is West African food mixed with French food mixed with, and so there is, even in the dialect, even in the way that they speak the Creole language, that is very Haitian, very West African,
right, yeah.
Very, and with a bit of French, and those French people were the slave masters, and so even with all of that, there are moments of influence that do shape us. Our big mamas aren't much different than the matriarchy of our tribes.
Right, exactly right.
Now, they have adapted for survival's sake to the Euro influence, but secretly, they have maintained bits of our culture that have in some way been passed along, particularly for feminine. I can't speak, I'm not a male, so I don't know how things are passed to you all, but I'm gonna reference a film that was on Netflix. I think it still is, and it was like a documentary, and it was really good. But it was called Our Mother's Gardens, and I think that kind of goes so much full circle, in that most of the women that were in that, featured in that documentary or docuseries, it wasn't a series, it was a documentary, were either from, as you mentioned, New York, or as you mentioned, Louisiana. And I think both of those are such an infused culture that still are very rich in African heritage in some ways. In the whole big picture of how we move and maneuver society, maybe not, but that African culture still found its way almost as a sacred society that continues to bleed through and keep us from fully losing who we are. So in a lot of ways, some of the roles in the house, Big Mama did this and Big Mama did that, aren't necessarily Euro influence.
Exactly right.
But they aren't easily accepted either in the general society.
That's correct.
Because it's the parts that are convenient are accepted, but the parts that could, bring uprise from our culture to theirs may be shut down. Exactly. It's not going to be taught about. It's not going to be mentioned in school books. It's not going to be, even in home economics, we're going to learn how to bake a cookie the way Sarah Lee or Betty Crocker or whoever, you know what I'm saying? And yes, they may have learned that. They may have learned how to fry a piece of chicken from a black woman, or making collard greens from a black woman, but our kids aren't being taught the black woman's recipe. They're being taught the black woman's recipe as filtered through the European one. That's just my opinion. I'm not going to say that's fact, but it's my opinion through the experience I've had. So we'll get ready to move on to the next question, or the next part of this segment. So with that being said, y'all, I want to ask you all as men, We use the term sacrifice in our part of it, but for you all, what do you feel that you give of yourself, towards your family or for the sake of your family, your wife, your significant other, your kids, that warrants a particular level of respect? Because we use the word submit, but really, respect or honor. That, kind of that balance creates a balance. You did this, and as respect, a show of respect to honor, we as women or your significant other do blah, 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 whatever that may be. Just give us some examples of some things you feel that you do or give in order to gain that.
Well, there again, it depends. If you speak for myself and how you were raised or developed, you're leaving the home and going to your workplace and working a day at the job. If you're wired to just, this is what you do. Have a great day. You know what I mean? It's not a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And the benefit of your hard day's work is a check to be able to feed your family and so on and so forth. That's for me. Now, there are certain situations, certain family dynamics where the job may not be as cushy. You have, we may go and have a great time in Orlando and stay in these wonderful condos, but somebody got up on that roof, when it was 98 degrees to put that roof up there.
Right.
That did not necessarily have those opportunities for a more cushy situation, and he told his family, just hold it down until I get back. Those can be, deemed as a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Men and women, or we're talking about men now, who are in law enforcement and other things where the workplace can be very hazardous. Mm-hmm. To just make that extra, or then working overtime, truck drivers and so on and so forth, very dangerous situations. It just comes with the territory. I wouldn't use the term sacrifice, but it can be, depending on those makeups and those jobs. It can be quite uncomfortable, and yet he's able to tell his family, please remain in as much comfort as possible at the home, safe, and I'll be here when I get home. And all I need is a good hot meal and a clean bathtub when it's time for me to get out, and I'm good. You know what I mean? So but that's where I am.
Okay. I agree with what Philip has said. I think one thing for me, when I think of sacrifice, I'm thinking that for me, if I sacrifice something, it's sacrifice at first, but then once I'm doing it consistently, it's no longer sacrifice. It just becomes a part of who I am. For instance, like I'm a music producer, and I love music. I've been doing it since middle school. Mm-hmm. And a person can start defining themselves around what they do the most. This is who I am. This is what I do. I produce music. So in our relationship, one thing that I've learned, and I'm so glad, but it's a situation where I'm so used to doing music at a certain amount of time for a certain period of time, and it's comfortable to me. Mm-hmm. It's soothing. It's it's relaxing. Like when someone have meditation, I can making some music and feeling, and then I'm thinking, man, my day's going wonderful. I have my kids at school. My wife, I don't know what she's doing in there, but I'm in my studio in my zone, right, working. But then I spend half the day, at time that we could have been together, doing something, building our bond, even further, and not even in the studio, just to learn how to just us be together and let's explore, things together, learning how that was a sacrifice for me, learning that, hey, because I'm so attached to the music, mm-hmm. That, hey, even though it makes me feel good, I'm not hurting nobody.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm not. There could have been times that I could have been building more with you, right? And so, and learning how to do that, to be like, wait a minute, okay, I could be in the studio, but no, baby, what you want to do? You know what I mean? Let's go do this. Let's just ride. Let's just go for a ride and talk. You know what I mean? And things of that nature. So, for me, that the rest, like I said, is circumstantial. Like Philip was saying, you know, it depends, you know, on the situation. But the biggest thing I can say for me is sacrificing is what I feel is a part of me that I'm totally comfortable with and everything. But then wait a minute, it's not just about me. You know, I'm in a relationship, and even with my children and everything, it's like, hey, I could work on music all day tomorrow.
Right.
But no, I'm not gonna do that all day.
Right.
I'm gonna do stuff with my family, and then when everybody's asleep, man, if I feel like staying up, you know, a couple of hours to do it,
right.
But I put in that time that I used to do with the music, to say no, we're gonna put that down,
right.
So I can build, because you know
we have to continue to understand that we're not dealing with robots.
right.
We're dealing with flesh and blood.
Exactly.
We've heard that from our significant others.
Yes.
We are flesh and blood. We have feelings. You know, we you know, how we spell love is Time. You know, we hear it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so yeah, yeah.
That's it. That's what's.
All right, awesome. So, as usual, we always have hot seat questions on the She's Black show, and it's gonna be no exception today. And here, so this question is, and I'm gonna pose it to you first.
Okay.
All right, so you got time to think about your answer. It's not as much of a hot seat for you. But do you have a non-negotiable in regards to what is expected of your wife or significant other that relates to gender roles? Something that you just expect this is for your wife to do.
Ooh.
Hey, I know, so.
This sounds like a setup.
I know. I'm not gonna give y'all. He really he the real hot seat on camera and in real life.
This is it right here, boy.
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I
You
know,
better
right?
say it.
a non-negotiable that I expect of you as my wife. I would. This may seem broad, but it is what I really think of. Is just having respect for me. You know, regardless, because we are flesh and blood. You know, I may not do everything, you know, correct. I will make mistakes. I will make decisions. You know what I mean? Because everything that I do is not just a mistake. It's like how I feel about it, and this is what I'm going. You know what I want to do. But I would ask that you respect that. You know, because that's, you know, more than anything, if I am doing something or engaged in something, I'm doing it because I fully believe in it at that time, you know. And what I'm saying, to respect that doesn't mean go along with it. It means respect and know that, okay, one, that, you know, my intent is not to harm you or to disrespect you or to take anything away from what we're building. But because that's non-negotiable, because if it's like, if you don't respect that, then that's like you don't respect my opinions or my feelings or my, you don't respect me. So that's a non-negotiable. If it's, you know, and at the same time, you know, I choose to give that what I expect also.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I want to just to say that. So that's a non-negotiable for me. It's not a particular thing to do. I can't say, oh, you gotta cook this or you gotta do this with the children. You got to.
So you don't have you don't have an expectation in regards to a role. Yours is just general. Each other. You will respect me. You expect me to respect you. It's not a particular thing that,
Yeah, it's hard for me because it's conditional. If certain conditions, if something happened right now where we both are out of work or we lose, it's, man, my expectation would be us respecting one another, but we figuring out how we're going to grind this thing and make it happen for our children, for our family. It would be hard for me to be like,
here's real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids in a family in real life, it happens.
yeah.
I'm going to say this really quick before we allow Philip his moment to answer that question. I do have a non-negotiable. If you here and you able-bodied, then in the middle of the night, we hear a bump. It is non-negotiable that you are the one getting up to go check.
Okay.
We are not negotiating that.
Right.
All right, baby. We love y'all. Let us finish, okay? We'll be done in just a second.
We're almost done, buddy.
Well, at least go get your brother. Both of y'all can come. All right, Philip. We're gonna give you a chance to answer that same question. Y'all, this is real life. We said we're gonna be real, raw, and relentless. We got a real family with real kids.
That's right.
They show up in the middle of the show. That's what you get.
That's good.
With that being said, though, I'm going to ask again, do you have a non-negotiable in regards to what is expected of your wife? You are married, so your wife, I said, or significant other, but you're married, so your wife, in relation to gender roles, anything gender specific that you are non-negotiable about?
He covered, my brother did very well with the word respect, and keeping it raw, because as we moved and as we
Give me a bag of popcorn.
as we
Go ahead.
because earlier in the show we talked about how things have gone under deconstruction, how new books are being written as to how we move forward, how do we prosper and be in good health, and even a broader understanding of what prospering is. If we respect one another and do our absolute best to be sure that we're walking that line of truth in everything that we do, using that as the median truth, that whatever discussion that we have is that we honor truth in whatever in our discussions, and love not only me but love my kids like there's no tomorrow. That's all I ask for.
Well, that's definitely fair. So, ladies, I think I've learned, a lot sitting here. I think sometimes the specifics that we put on the idea of gender roles and submission, either A, these two guys are anomalies and they're the only ones that they are, or B, society has influenced us to believe that the idea of gender roles and submission have a greater impact than they really do. And maybe we need to just individually within our relationships, just have that conversation and find some balance, because I think we've decided upon ourselves that you all expect something of us that you actually don't, or you view our positioning in a way that is not actually real. So maybe we've built up this theory in our heads and we move accordingly, and maybe we need to deconstruct that theory because it might not exist, y'all. I mean, listening to them, I don't think they expect of us what we think they expect, which is a good thing for y'all and a moment to reevaluate and introspect for us. So with that being said, we are coming to the end of our show. As usual, we always have our affirmation for the week. And so, y'all meet my babies, Kefre and Nahisi, because they came in. We Daddy and Mommy are both out here. They can't sit back there too long. So, our affirmation for the week. We as Black women and Black men honor the ebb and flow of our energies and find balance within that honor. So thank y'all again for joining us. Make sure you tell us what you want to talk about. If you are watching us on YouTube, remember to like, to share, to subscribe, hit the notifications bell so that you get reminders every time we have an episode come up. Also, check us out on Facebook at The She's Black Show. Check us out on Instagram at The She's Black Show. www.theshesblackshow.com. And if you are listening to us on your favorite podcast station and you already know where to find us, keep finding us where you're at. But for those of you who are watching us, then you can ride in your car and listen to us too on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, and it is just She's Black. So thank you guys again for the conversation. Yes, I think it was awesome. We're going to be having more of these. So y'all, this was the first glimpse of She's Black and He Is Too. And so we will be launching that for those of you who truly support us and really feel like it's worth pouring into. We will be launching that on Patreon. So you'll be able to get some exclusive content on our Patreon, which will be launching soon. So listen out for that and support us in a different kind of way. All right, it's much love, much peace, much blessings, and we will see y'all in 2 weeks.
Yeah, wait for the camera. Wait for the camera. Wait. Say have a good night.
Have a good night.